Welcome back to Service and Beyond. Today joining us is Boeing Senior Leader and also Leader of the Boeing Veterans Working Group, Amy List, former Air Force officer. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very, very much for having me, Matt.
Great to have you here and talk about what Boeing's doing in the veteran space and also in defence industry.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really excited.
So your background in defence is somewhat similar to mine, joining at the Defence Academy, out of school, in Air Force in your case.
That's right. So I went to ADFA as a 17-year-old doing an aeronautical engineering degree. Didn't really have too much of an idea of what the future held for me. I didn't have a military history in my family, but I was just had seen the aircraft and what the Air Force did and thought it was something I wanted to be part of, so jumped in.
Absolutely. And where did it take you after your degree there at Canberra? Where did you go to from there?
So straight out of graduating from my aeronautical engineering degree, I went to RAF Base Edinburgh in Adelaide to work on the P3 aircraft. The first job that I had was on the flight line, maintaining the 10 Squadron P3s, with looking after a whole bunch of very, very knowledgeable techs who looked at a 21-year-old girl and wondered what on earth would I know, and quite frankly I didn't know very much at all. But fantastic learning curve and just one of the best experiences of my life.
Yeah, fascinating. And that was a great aircraft, somewhat similar to the Navy Seahawk I flew, of a similar vintage. I think the P3 went back to the 60s originally.
Did. Yeah.
Very old aircraft with a lot of history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting to work on an ageing aircraft at that time, but it was a very, very busy aircraft, very operational. We're doing a lot of border protection missions, a lot of trips up and through Southeast Asia to connect with our neighbours there, and then obviously moving into some of the areas of the Middle East operations and surveillance over those deployed airfields.
Yeah, and that border protection stuff was often overlooked. I know during my time, really from, I guess, 2000 onwards, there was a big focus on the Middle East deployments, but of course border protection and the Asia-Pacific environment was huge for P3s back then.
We spent an awful lot of time up in Darwin.
Yeah.
And those aircraft needed to be flying 24 hours a day, checking out for illegal fishing, checking out for other boats, but as I said, importantly, keeping the relations with our neighbours as well, and popping into places like Nandi and Guam and all of those other lovely tropical locations that it wasn't too bad to get
Not a bad lifestyle at all,
yeah.
Hey? Awesome. And did you get off to the Middle East at all on any deployments there?
I did. So the P3s went over there and operated for quite a while. Going over as an engineer, you're really in a management role. So we're there to make sure that the aircraft could launch, operating off the US air bases there. And we were able to rotate in and out fairly regularly. But it was really important to be there to support the air crews and collect them when they're done and make sure that they had everything ready to be able to do their missions.
Yeah, and following that, or in addition to your time over there in the Middle East, you of course have a partner who was in the Air Force, and you had children, and of course were at home when he went away to the Middle East.
That's right. So yeah, I was, depending on your perspective, silly enough to marry a pilot in the Air Force, and that did result in him being away a lot. While I was going up to Darwin, as I mentioned, so was he. Lucky enough in those days, it was really just the dogs we had to worry about, and we managed to juggle that. But as some of the deployments got longer and we started having a family, the pressure on those deployments became very different, and it was about how can I keep the kids happy. How can we support all of the other families as well, with all of the mothers, they're all mothers at that time, with children that were left behind for periods of up to 6 months. One of the things that I love about the military is that we had 2 6-month deployments, one when we were in Adelaide and one when the children were a little bit older in Canberra. And, I was never alone for a Saturday night. Didn't matter what was going on. There was always someone who would put up their hand and say, hey, come on over for a meal. And it was just that sense of community, that it didn't really matter where you were or where your blood family was. There was always somebody else looking out for you to make sure that you didn't feel lonely. And there were times when I had to say, you know what, I just need to stay and watch a movie tonight. But it was much better to be doing that than to feel lonely. And that was something, that connection and that community is something that is so important. And I know we'll talk about the links to the Veterans Working Group later on, but it's that feeling of community that we're really wanting to continue into Boeing and how we look after our veterans once people have made a leap out of service.
Yeah, and those links of service really stay with us throughout our lives. Some of our most trying and testing periods are during training and during operations. And, I'm sure you're really close with a lot of those friends still.
Absolutely. They're the strongest relationships that you forge in that time of your life. And also my kids were able to form relationships with the other children of deployed members, and they still keep in touch with those kids as well, which is really, really lovely and really sweet for them to talk to kids who've been through what they've been through, because not many people can understand what it means to just be able to talk to Dad for 10 minutes once a week on Skype,
Yeah, yeah. And that's a bit of a topic at the moment that's pretty prominent, especially with some people, including Beck Rayner of Military Wife Life podcast. She's actually a spouse of a gentleman I joined the Navy with, Scott Rayner, another aeronautical engineer, and the big focus on not just the members going away, but the families to provide that support, without which defence couldn't do the job.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
I've got a friend who just got back from a 4-month deployment actually to the Asia Pacific on a Navy ship, and his wife was just overjoyed to have him back. And of course, it's not an operational deployment from the former sense in the Middle East, but it's just as grueling and just as arduous.
I think one of the really important things as well is to remember that when the deployed member goes away, those that are left behind just get on with life. You get your routines. Mum's in charge, and everything kind of works because it has to. And I remember that reintegration piece when Michael came back home and had to kind of find his place in the family again.
That's right.
Because the kids they did whatever I said. Yeah, so it is a big adjustment both ways.
Yeah, I have heard that one. I didn't have children during my time in defence, but I certainly heard that Dad or Mum, if she's away, can be on the outer when she comes back. The routine's established, and she's back at the table.
That's just a little bit superfluous at times, but yeah.
So how did you come to your decision to leave Air Force after your career?
Look, it just came to a natural endpoint. I was lucky enough to be able to navigate a career with my husband, who was serving, and we had multiple postings together. And I had both Sophie and Angus while I was still in the Air Force. And then when we moved up to Brisbane, it was difficult for me to get a job with the Air Force because I only wanted to work part-time. Conditions in the Air Force have changed an awful lot now, but back then to get part-time work as a squadron leader really wasn't an option. So I chose to spend some time with the kids at that point, but it was really a step for me that it wasn't that I wanted to leave the Air Force, it was that it just couldn't work at that point. And so I looked for ways of how I could still contribute to the mission, just not in uniform anymore.
And for you, that was a step out into defence industry in 2010.
That's right.
Yep.
So I dipped my toe gently back into the workforce after a little bit of time out with the kids and started working for Raytheon part-time. Defence industry, it was really great. They've really broadened me because I worked in the Air Force, but Raytheon did a lot of Army, Navy, other work. So it actually really opened my eyes to what defence industry generally can provide to the military. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're in business development. I've had a few people point out to me that's a pretty natural pathway from lots of people in defence, regardless of your background. How did you find going from doing the job and doing the engineering aspects to the other side of it, which was really about understanding what defence needed and taking care of the products and things?
I actually really loved it because in the area that I was working, we were looking at support, how to support some products. And when I was in the Air Force, you're always walking into a support system that's already been established and you have to try to fit into it and make it work. When you're putting in new proposals and you're starting from scratch, that idea to start with a greenfields solution and figure out how you can really do things better and improve the capability for the military and really just give them the best answer that they can was a lot of fun, actually, going, we can do things differently.
And how did it feel when you walked out one day, you're in a blue uniform, next minute you're in business attire, and you're doing a similar role? Was that a strange transition? Was that a natural move for you?
It didn't feel too strange to me. I think because of the group of people that I worked with, they were all veterans as well. So it was really interesting how I kind of just landed between groups of like-minded people where everybody still had that same mission in mind. And we were able to just continue to go, what's the best solution? How can we really do this and meet the outcome of delivering the Air Force's or the Army's capability, whatever we're working on at the time. So I didn't really find the transition that hard. I think, honestly, the biggest shock was when because I took long service leave for a while after maternity leave and then starting work and finally when I ceased my reserve service, going back onto base, and there was a number of years that changed. And while you think you are part of the team, everything else moves on. So it wasn't until a few years down the track when I went on base and realised actually the people in these buildings have all changed. It didn't feel quite as familiar anymore. So it was a shock maybe a few years down track for me.
Yeah. And after a few years, you moved on to Boeing, in fact, in 2018.
That's right. I did really enjoy my time with Raytheon, but when an opportunity came up to work at Boeing, I was absolutely ready for the change and really excited. And I have to say, while I enjoyed looking at different parts of different domains with Raytheon, coming to Boeing actually really did feel like coming home. Sounds corny, but to get back in, and particularly in sustainment ops where we're supporting those aircraft, keeping them flying, it really did just feel like right back to my roots of the earliest days of my Air Force career. So I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of Boeing Air Force veterans getting around. In fact, I think most ex-military people you talk to did some Air Force time, and it was a natural move for me coming across from C-17s flying these guys and knowing that Boeing did the maintenance and sustainment and not just the Australian subsidiaries but the US parent company supports their all the way through. And I mean, one thing that I found fascinating is any mission we were on overseas, we could jump on a satellite phone in the cockpit and call up what was called Conference Hotel and speak to an engineer back in Long Beach in California to get support on any problems we had.
That's fantastic, isn't it? That's
so yeah, just amazing to know. Yep, 24/7 wherever you are around the world.
Yeah. And so how did it feel for you then, being on the receiving end of that support to delivering it when you came and joined Boeing?
Yeah, interesting. It was probably the highlight of my career. Obviously, I did some Navy time deployed on Navy warships, but coming to Air Force, being part of the transport role with the C-17, which was really changing for the whole of Defence Force and the government's abilities and capabilities around the world, it was a huge opportunity. And jumping the fence, really coming to Boeing, I felt really obliged to produce the highest level of service I could for training for the C-17 crews in the simulator. So it was funny. You didn't have necessarily the military support system, but you had your colleagues and your camaraderie with the Boeing employees, and it was all about delivering that level of service.
And with the recent events in Afghanistan and the service that the C-17s provided there, I keep regular contact with the virtual fleet and the leaders in US and UK as for the global 286, I think, is the number of C-17s we have, and just the pride and mission focus that the whole Boeing team had to be able to support those operations in stuff that is just so vitally important and I think did touch many people who'd served in that area really deeply. It was wonderful to still feel connected to that.
Definitely. And obviously sustainment operations is very important across not just C-17s, but around half the Defence Force aviation fleet. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Boeing has a huge footprint and also a great responsibility to deliver on supporting those aircraft as we grow as well. So, yeah, the Super Hornet and Growlers are operating and deploying often, and we have teams that operate around the clock 24 hours a day to keep them flying. We've got the Classic Hornets, which will be doing their last flight in just a couple of weeks, which is unbelievable.
I know. Yep.
And then obviously we've got growing activities with Rotary Wing. So Helicopter Aircrew Training School we've been running for a while now, and that keeps delivering. We're about to hit 20,000 training hours soon for that. And then Chinooks, the workhorse of the ADF, more Chinooks on order there to keep growing that capability. And then, of course, Apache.
Yeah, very exciting, that one. One aircraft I would have loved to have flown during my time in uniform, but who knows, maybe I'll get a gig for Boeing.
There is a lot of passion about Apache, that's for sure.
There's a lot of competition for that spot.
There is.
Yeah. Great aircraft. Magic. Yeah, I know, thinking back to the C-17 days and coming across to Boeing, it's just amazing to be part of really those aviation platforms that are doing those missions like you talk about in the Middle East, which is just second to none, really. Absolutely, yeah. So coming forward a few years, you've now taken the helm of the Veterans Working Group at Boeing, and that was stood up in 2017, in fact, to support Boeing families and veterans who would come across from defence. Yeah. So there's a couple of pillars there where we really look to support defence members. What's it all about to you, the Veterans Working Group?
So For me, supporting our veterans is all about making sure that people who have served their nation continue to be able to have meaningful employment and lives and family support no matter what their next step is. So for those that have chosen to make their next step to Boeing, we do whatever we can to make sure that that transition is seamless and help support their families. But we also see our role as a major prime in defence as being broader than that and offering support to really anyone who is thinking of transitioning, any veterans, and how we can help point them in the right direction for what it is they want to do, help talking about retraining or even just translating what they've already done and their aptitudes into something that can deliver a meaningful employment for them for their future. We've got just such a great team of passionate people in the Veterans Working Group who dedicate a lot of their own spare time to progressing a number of initiatives that help get a lot of not only action for those that we have currently employed, but also touching those that are just starting to think about it as well.
Yeah, and Boeing's been very active in sponsorship also with support to the 2018 Invictus Games for I should say defence veterans who've suffered injuries, be it physical or mental, from their service careers, and also funding the Australian War Memorial Centenary of Anzac exhibit. So very active in the community. And I do know that 2018, in the inaugural Prime Minister's Veterans Awards, Boeing took out the prize for Company of the Year. So it's really great to see some really substantial support happening into the community. Really,
really very proud of that. And I think we'd like to reach into not only those areas that you mentioned, but legacy. We provide a lot of support to legacy to make sure that we're got the mechanism to reach into families of veterans as well as Soldier On and a couple of other organisations that actively support veterans and in particular their mental health if they're having issues that need some additional support. And we also supported the memorial, the 42 for 42 memorial at Suncorp Stadium that recognises the 41 veterans that died in Afghanistan, and the 42nd is for those who continue to suffer because of the results of their wartime service. I think the commitment that Boeing's made to all of those organisations is really important, but I also like how it raises awareness within the company as well. The Canungra Challenge is something that for whatever reason each year I continue to get my arm twisted to participate and jump into the Coomera River in July for some reason. I missed that this year. It
must be quite icy out there.
Oh, it's cold. But just getting out there, having a bit of fun, getting that teamwork and camaraderie going, and not only just seeing a tiny bit of what our veterans go through, but raising a bucket load of money at the same time is great to be part of.
Yeah, indeed. And I think alluding to what we were saying earlier about the changing nature of defence service and the flexibility of people going back to Defence Force if they wish. Now there's a service category model.
Yes.
With lots of options for full-time service all the way through to reserve service. And there's a lot happening in terms of veterans moving back and forth between the company and Defence.
I would like to see a lot more.
Yeah.
One of our initiatives, the Veterans Working Group has 3 pillars, being employment, development and community. And in that development piece, we're looking a lot at reservists as well, of how we can better use the reservists we already have, but get that movement back and forth between defence happening a little bit more. At the moment, it's a rarity, but the conversations that I'm having with defence at the moment really are around how do we make that a norm? How do from the day someone starts their service, defence are wanting them to think about what their transition might look like. And does that mean that they get to a certain point in their military career, go and join industry, go back? And how can we normalise that rather than somebody not thinking about their transition until 2 or 3 months out from needing to move? Or, dare I say it, they get a posting order they don't like and think that they've got to get out because they can't move their family. Mm-hmm. We need to have people having open and honest discussions earlier and really plan a lot of those transitions. And I would love to see more people going back and forth. There's more planning to work through with defence, but I think we'll see a lot more of that in the future.
And that's something that's been highlighted by certainly my guests on the podcast, and a lot of reports that have come out about transition, about the fact that quite often it is a last minute decision. It's, if you're lucky 3 months, but if you're not, it might be 6 weeks or the minimum notice period, and someone's out the door looking for work and trying to translate those skills.
Yeah. And when I've been doing a lot of work with the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on Veterans Employment, and a lot of the data that we get out of that shows that the veterans that have the hardest time transitioning are those that didn't make the choice themselves. Transition was somewhat forced on them. In many cases, that's medical, but in other cases, it's factors like a posting cycle or family issues or other things that they need to make a decision to leave, and they weren't emotionally ready to leave just yet. So we do need to get better at preparing people for transition and then be ready to support them when they do. And we can talk maybe a little bit later about some of the initiatives and things that the Veterans Working Group is looking at doing to support some of those higher risk veterans who didn't make the choice themselves.
And now's probably a good time. So there's obviously some good initiatives coming through in terms of having a transition buddy.
Yes.
And obviously having some packs ready so you can step out, you can know where your support is, you can be guided in terms of CV preparation, getting a LinkedIn profile sorted, getting all those little things in line you might not have thought about until you were ready to step out.
That's right. Look, when it comes to veteran support organisations, there's an enormous amount of goodwill out there with so many not-for-profits. But dare I say it, there are so many that it becomes a little bit confusing to try to navigate. And it's one of the areas where we'd like to try to simplify that for people and help them through our Veterans Liaison Officers as well, who have sort of a broader understanding of what each of those organisations can do, can help navigate for people on where they might be best placed to seek support. That might be through DVA for injuries that they've received, might be emotional support that they're looking for, perhaps things for their families, really anything that that a veteran feels that they need to find more fulfilling and meaningful work. We can help point them in the right direction through those VLOs and other connections we have. Certainly the Veterans Buddies is something that I'm really looking forward to getting off the ground properly, where people, when they come in, they can find somebody who's been through a similar experience to them and can help them understand, oh, that's just what happens in civilian world, or, just ask those sort of questions about where things might be different, how they can approach different people within the organisation, where military people are generally used to a very hierarchical structure. Some of those little things can take a bit of getting used to, and anything we can do to help navigate that will only help.
Yeah, for me, I know I joined the company just under 2 years ago, and even for me, coming out at almost 40 years of age, it was strange going from there's the rank structure, where people are in the hierarchy in the organisation, to business structure, business terminology. So it was a little bit dislocating getting my head around those things, and then finding out this person's probably a veteran too. And I know the company has about 20% employee veteran in the organisation, about 50% of management.
That's right.
Veterans.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of our veterans come and join us when they're a bit more senior through the organisation, and makes their leadership and the skills that they've picked up through the military perfectly suited to a lot of our management roles. But obviously a lot of our, particularly our technical trades workforce, many of them have worked at Amberley or worked at Townsville in uniform, and then are able to make that transition to change uniforms and keep working on the platforms they love, delivering on the missions that they care about. But sort of in their own terms, which is really good to be able to support them to do that. I had an interesting conversation with a veteran not that long ago. He was ex-Navy and had been posted around a fair bit, but said to me it took him a while. It took him about 6 to 12 months to realise that what he was missing and why he was somewhat struggling to adjust was because of the community. I mentioned, when my husband was deployed, every Saturday I had a different person calling me up, because there was just this sort of natural mateship that was there. It didn't matter where you were posted to. There were people who went, hey, you work with me, come over for a barbecue.
Come on over.
Yeah. And when you make that transition into civilian life, those communities aren't natural. You actually have to work for them now, because people have families and their own friendship groups, and they're not used to just inviting the new kid into over for a barbecue. So part of what we're looking to do as well is not only just make people alert to that community, and that maybe they need to think about putting a little bit of extra effort into establishing those relationships, but also to expect it, and to and for those of us that are used to it now, to reach out, reciprocate, and create that community. So it's it's little things. There are people who are having significant mental health issues from their service, which require a particular level of support. But also each veteran has their own little adjustments that need to be made. And we're looking at providing support across that whole spectrum.
Yeah, and the defence support umbrella, for want of a better term, has really changed quite significantly in recent years. Obviously, you separated just over 11 years ago, and in 2 years for myself, going back, even further beyond, it was a vastly different space. And I think one positive legacy of the time in the Middle East and the rate of operations for the country has been just the focus now on veteran affairs and the welfare of families and the community.
That's right. One of the other areas that both the Boeing Veterans Working Group and some of the other committees that I'm part of with government is keeping a close eye on is the Royal Commission into veterans and some of the mental health and other issues that they have. We know that having these discussions out in the open can be a good thing for some people, but it can also trigger memories and things that make people feel really uncomfortable or really sad that we need to be aware of. And we are starting to test the waters on how we need to react and be aware and support our members who might have reactions to the news that comes through for this Royal Commission as well. It really is a difficult area because, as you say, 11 years ago we would never have been having these conversations. So it's great that we're providing support for the veterans, but we need to be prepared to change the support that we provide along with that changing environment as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was a long time coming, the Royal Commission. There's been a lot of advocacy to make it happen. It's going to be a difficult period, but I think at the longer term, that's a positive process, positive move.
Yeah. I think the engagement of the government and all of those other defence agencies will only see things better, make things better for our veterans and provide better levels of support.
So, Amy, the landscape in the country from a security standpoint is really evolving quite rapidly with things occurring in the country like the bushfires at the start of last year. There's climate change occurring, the COVID pandemic's putting demands on defence, and obviously the security environment in the region. What's the change there and the focus from government towards defence and defence industry really to be an active participant in that?
We're really moving towards a solid partnership between defence and industry now, rather than it being defence relying on industry to do whatever they can't do themselves. It really is that we're wanting to collaborate on how we can work together to grow the capability that we need. Through the recent AUKUS announcement and the follow-on ministerial discussions between Australia and the US, the requirement for the US to have long-term sustainable capabilities within Australia to repair and support their equipment is becoming front and centre. And there are numerous discussions at a very high level on how Australia can provide more support in the region, not only for Australian forces, but for the US when they're operating here and perhaps some of our regional partners. So we're working really closely with government to see how we can be ready to do that. But it's not only for the new work that might come with a somewhat more worrying security posture. It's also working within the constraints of the Defence Force at the moment. So Army aviation is a particular area of interest to Boeing and how we support our platforms. And with the growth in the Chinook fleet and Apache coming, we're working really closely with Army on how we can make sure these capabilities do what they need to do the moment they're delivered. And Army are working with some significant constraints around their own headcount, their own ability to recruit, and they're looking to industry to provide that buffer of making sure that we've got enough people, enough trained, ready people to go as these capabilities arrive, and that's really, really challenging. So we're lucky enough to have the relationships that we can take a strategic view to what this rotary wing capability is and where it needs to be in 5 years' time to support many more helicopters than we currently have. Part of this growth also includes how do we train our own people, how do we support the Army in training increased numbers, and also how do we strengthen those relationships with the US and repatriate a lot of the work to Australia to be able to be a lot more agile and meet the Australian government's needs so we don't have to work back through the US all the time. With the sole source decision for Apache, which we haven't signed yet, we still need to work really hard to deliver on that. But Chinook being the sort of bedrock of Army cargo transport, there's a great responsibility that Boeing owns as well to make sure that those aircraft do deliver on their mission. And we take that really, really seriously. The Commonwealth is quite open about what they expect from Boeing, and we're fully prepared to rise to the challenge, and I do expect that of my team. It's exciting times.
It is, and big challenges ahead, big responsibilities, but great, I think, to see the government's focus on bringing a lot of these areas of defence. We used to have overseas companies. We used to do in the US, we used to do them in Europe, and now we're bringing that production, those abilities to do those things in Australia, and obviously the workforce benefits, and then veterans benefit when they come across, so it really is a step forward.
That's exactly right. Luckily, we have a lot of veterans who seem to not mind living in Townsville. Just a hint, a lot of growth in Townsville. So, look, I think that's part of the value that veterans can bring to our organisation as well, is that really intimate customer knowledge to be able to understand the mission, understand the strategic direction, and help keep those of us that have been out for a while, or those of us that haven't had a military background, really focused on the mission and how this kit is used in anger. Not only that, but our close relationship relies on trust. And the Army, in this case, in Rotary Wing case, is putting an awful lot of trust in Boeing to keep those aircraft serviceable, keep them upgraded, keep them delivering on their mission. And while a lot of that trust can be developed through us delivering what we say we're going to do, it's those long-term relationships as well that are deep and strong and help build a bond between Army and Boeing. And I think that's one of those intangible benefits that veterans can bring to our organisation.
Yeah, it's good to know always when you think about who's in service or who's in uniform still, you can count, on one hand, on a couple of hands, just the amount of veterans that or amount of serving members that you're in touch with and that you serve with, and relationships go on. So
that's exactly right. Yeah,
it is. Well, Amy, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. It's been really fantastic to talk about your experiences in your career and obviously family in the deployed environment. Now you work here with Boeing and leading the Boeing Veterans Working Group. So thank you for your time. Really enjoyed chatting, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. It was great to be able to share both my experiences, but also what the Veterans Working Group can do, and share a little bit more about our vision, and I guess just invite anyone who wants to know more about veteran support, or if they have any great ideas for us, get in touch. Love to hear from anyone.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amy. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.